Okay, I'm back. I just took my alarms off. Back to the story. They end up taking me to this, like, mental institution of sorts. And there I met a myriad of colorful people, to be honest. Like, a lot of troubled people. I actually really got along with the kids in there, and I kind of wanted to stay just so I could talk to the people that were in there more. If I really think about it, I kind of wanted to stay just because I met people that needed help. And I ended up in, I guess what you could say, a ghetto one, because it was the only one in proximity that would take me with my liver enzymes so high. And at that point, it's like, I'm here in this place. They've taken my clothes. I just tried to kill myself. They don't trust me not to kill myself again. I just want my teddy bear. I remember me thinking about that. I had gotten a Scentsy at the hospital that I couldn't bring with me because I might try to hide something in there and might try to hurt myself. Which, at that point, it was like I'd already got caught. I didn't want to die anymore. I'd already had to see... Well, I mean, I did still want to die, but I wasn't going to try to do it right then and there. It already upset my family, my upsetting. Anyway, my family was already very, like, emotional and upset over this whole experience, which I felt bad for, but it was also kind of like if I was dead, you guys would just be here dealing with this anyway. And as harsh as it sounds, I didn't care. I had attempted suicide throughout my life so many times, and I didn't mention this because I always forget about it because I had so many minor attempts of suicide. There we go, I'm going to leave that in. I've had so many attempts of suicide as a child growing up that it was kind of like, if any of those times would have worked, I would have already been gone. So this one time where I actually, like, went through with something more serious, to me it was just, oh, look, I almost did it. I'm still here. And, you know, it's a really dark place. I didn't want to get better. I didn't want to feel better. All this stuff had happened. My life was ruined, or so I thought. My life was ruined. I'm never going to come back from this low point in my life. I can't get out of this hole. My life is ruined. I didn't end up finishing high school. I got my GED when I was 17. But before then, I had also went to another school to try to get my stuff straight there. And at this other school, there was a kid that called me fat. Now, at the time, I was only like 130 pounds. And this boy, he called me fat. Now, he may not have known what I was going through. But then again, I don't feel like this particular individual would have cared either way. And hearing somebody say something that negative about me while I'm still, like, on this brink of, I still want to die. I still wish I wasn't here. I don't want to exist on this planet anymore. And it was just, this little thing clicks, and I've been kind of thinking I was fat, but you know, this individual just told me that I am fat. I'm fat. And what happens is I end up starving myself. I get this eating disorder, and it's to the extent to where, you know, if you talk to people that have struggled with, like, anorexia, a lot of times we talk about the voice, or we call it Anna, where it'll sit there and it'll be like, don't eat. Don't touch that. If you eat that, you're going to be fat. It could be something like an apple slice. Eventually, I end up, like, chewing and spitting stuff out. Like, I'll chew it and I'll spit it out because I don't want the calories. Or I calorie count consistently to the extent to where I can still figure calories out now, today, and now that I'm 22, and this happened when I was 16, 17, I still know the basics of calorie counting, and I can still look at something and I go, I bet that's around 600 calories, because I know other things that are about what that is. And lo and behold, I'll generally be right. And it's really like sad that I experience that, and it's sad that anybody has experienced that, because these experiences are parallel to others. There's a certain sympathetica in the fact that my experiences, while they are my own, and your experiences, while they are your own, someone else has gone through that or a very similar experience. So, seeing as how I've gone through like abuse from my father, and it's been verbal abuse, like smacking you on the head. I'll mention more stuff. He'll smack us on the head and then call us idiots or morons. And I don't know if you realize how much like those little things can affect the development of that human that you're raising, because they take in everything, and they take in more than you probably like to admit. They know what's going on. They're not dumb just because they're small. And it's kind of like I realized that because I wasn't dumb when I was a kid, and so it's like they're children and they know more than what they can really tell you. They're taking it in, they're little sponges, and while they may not be able to adequately communicate that back to the world yet, they understand, or they don't understand, depending on what the situation is. Sorry, I went off on a rant on that. I'll talk about that more in another video. Continuing on, between the abuse and the trauma and the being molested, which I found out that I was molested again at a younger age back in 2016. I was at my friend's house and I was just kind of sitting there. I was like looking at this particular spot on the ceiling, and I start feeling these emotions, and I just start crying. I felt horrible. I felt like somebody was touching, like, it's not necessarily like someone's touching me, it's like this fear and this what is happening to me. And it was like I got this sort of like sense that I had been molested as a child. Like, this was the feeling, and it's like all you really get is the feeling, because I was so young. And this is still kind of fresh for me because I only found it a year ago. So that's something I'm still kind of like, hey, there's a lot of my behaviors I had growing up, may have been caused by the fact that I was touched as a child. And at such a young age that I had not only would have had trouble recalling it, but most likely suppressed it to cope with what happened. And that's another reason I kind of go with my memories in shards, is because I don't remember a lot of my childhood. I can't recall them very specifically, and that bothers me, and I'm not sure if it's because I blocked them out due to trauma or what. I gotta think about where I was going with that, because I always get off topic. High school. Anyway, the eating disorder. That anorexia turned into bulimia, and it was bulimia and anorexia mixed together. I was walking at lunch instead of going and eating at that point, and I was eating maybe 400 calories a day, if that, 400 calories on a good day. I was exhausted. Like, I was drained. I went home before a band practice, and I fell asleep because I was so tired, and I ended up missing that. And I actually got in trouble to the extent where I wasn't allowed to go to the band thing that we'd been practicing for. And I was one of the percussionists that really had it down somewhat. And so people were actually pretty upset with me. But my band teacher was like, you can't go because you missed practice. I was like, oh, I showed up at the school bus and everything to go. Didn't bother to tell me that I wasn't allowed to go if I hadn't been to practice. Anyway, before my mom can really come pick me up, I end up taking this, like, out on myself, which, I mean, it was my fault, but at the same time, I don't feel like you should be that harsh on children for making an earnest mistake. Like, even as a high schooler, is still, like, those things are something that's going to stick and carry with them, and you really have to think about how you're raising people, or how you're, like, showing people things that work. Yeah, life's not going to be fair. And while these can be lessons, it's just the way that he said it and the way he came off was inappropriate. Back to what I was saying. I end up hitting myself in the stomach, like punching myself, just, you know, taking this out. Like, I did this to myself. I've got to make sure I never do it again, because I did this. This is my fault. My fault, my fault, my fault. And those are the kind of, like, that's the kind of thought process you get, where it's almost like a trapped animal in a sense, to where you're just like, it's almost maddening. And having your headspace in that almost maddening state for a year, I can't imagine people that have let that dig so deep into them that they experience it consistently. I'm sorry, I'm yawning, I just woke up. I honestly, you've got eating disorders. I know how that feels. I know how helpless life around you feels, and how just a little bit being like, I'm not going to eat today, is just this little bit of power in this mess of I can't control anything. And that's what it is for a lot of people that do struggle with eating disorders, is their life is out of their control. So then by trying to control their eating disorder, you're actually making it worse. The only people that can turn and look at their eating disorder and be like, I don't want this anymore, I want you to stop. The only people that can do that are the people dealing with it. And that's how it is for a lot of issues. The only thing you can do is support them and let them know it's not healthy, and you really just want to see them better. And here's this thing, is if they're in that headspace, you can tell them that. You can be as warm and as kind as you want, but unless, like, if they're so, think of it like a, you guys ever watch My Hero Academia? You know, whenever Bakugo got caught by the slime monster and he's all wrapped up, think of an eating disorder as like that. That is just covering you. It's enveloped you. You're stuck in it. And you can either fight to get out of it, or you could be like, I'm done. This is it. This is my life now. I want this. And people are going to decide those things more than once. And it's just a hard place to be in. It really is. I want to go into it deeper later, but I cannot right now. We're getting close to the time I need to leave for work, but I want to continue talking. I want to finish these videos. Fast forward, I had actually ended up getting taken out of school because while I was at school, this was English class, nobody would trade me papers. Just wouldn't trade me papers to grade. Like, that was it. Nobody would trade me papers. Everybody's over there snickering, laughing, and I'm actually, like, I got yelled at by the teacher because nobody would trade me a paper, and I'm like, nobody will trade me. And I was still the one sitting there getting yelled at because I was also being targeted by these children. And after I told her that nobody would trade me, you know, she does go off on the kids. I like that teacher a lot, actually. But in that situation, it was just everything. I just wanted to come to school, go home. I hated being here. Everybody didn't like me. And when you're targeted to that extent, and you've already got all this other stuff going on, it's really hard. If I end up crying here, I'm going to let myself cry, because that's another thing, is you've got to let yourself feel your emotions. You can't say, oh no, I'm going there, and stop myself. That's not healthy. If you're a very feeling type, you're going to have those emotions and more heavy-handed if you never let yourself feel them. You have to let yourself go through those emotions. You have to let yourself live through the extent of those emotions so that you can come back down and be like, that felt better. I feel better. I let myself. I end up, after that class, going to the bathroom and crying. I was also trying to throw my food up because at the same time, everything else is out of control. And if I can just lose this weight, people will treat me better. People will like me. This is what it becomes. It becomes a sort of like scapegoat. It's kind of like whenever people marginalize a group of people for their own fears, that it's just easier to target a group as well. But it's still like I'm scapegoating this issue onto my weight, when really it's just out of my control. And I wish I was as strong as I was now, but that's not possible because I had to go through that pain to get to where I am now. It's very important that you take these lessons and you take them as lessons and you mold them and you examine them and you kind of like try to find out what's really going on here, what actually happened. And that's really what I've done with a lot of my life, is I really investigated. I end up going back to those points and saying, okay, I don't feel like that was it. I feel like there are other reasons these things happened. And so I just end up like really psychoanalyzing every little piece of that situation so that I can help others. And I've done this for a long time, and it wasn't to help others, it was to help myself. And I really hope that I can get people over here to take me seriously, because I really, really want to help you guys. You guys have to let me in to let me help you. I can't do that on my own. It's kind of like a push-pull thing. As I said, fighting the tide. And you're sitting there and you're struggling and you're trying to keep yourself afloat, but all you're doing is sinking. Maybe you should just stop. Try to fill your lungs with air. Try to swim up to the surface. Try to do it with a sense of calm. Because that's generally when you're going to come out on top, is when you look at the situation in a calm manner. Well, I say you do have to let yourself experience those emotions. There's also the fact that you have to be able to control yourself. Because we all have emotions. But there's going to be points when we're having those emotions where it just feels so out of our control. And if you give in to the fact that everything's out of your control and this emotion is so out of my control, if you give in to the fact that you're having this animalistic lash out, and if you can't pull yourself back from that, you leave yourself in the situation where you now stop. You end up in the situation where you're like, I did that, but it wasn't my fault. Well, you did that, and while your mind may have been going through some stuff, it's still ultimately your fault as well. I highly believe in the individual, and I'll go into that later. It's kind of like this getting to know me thing, and trying to be so authentically open while I have so many opinions on things. It's hard for me to cut them down into little easy to consume bits. Back to my story. I ended up getting taken out of school. I didn't end up showing up to my next class, or I did late, and the teacher ends up questioning me. And I just ended up getting taken out of school. I go to alternative school for a while. Didn't really do well there, because self-study out of these books that are old just wasn't enough for me. I wanted to study things I wanted to learn, I suppose. And I just overall at that point was done with school. I get my GED when I'm 17. Yawning. And then I was in a relationship at the time, and things were going better. I'm going to end this here because now I've reached to the point where I'm about into my adult life. This is probably going to be like a 4-part series to start my YouTube channel, and then we'll go into like topics and stuff. And I'm sorry I'm so rambly, but I'm nervous to be on camera, and I'm nervous to be exposing myself like this, where these are all going to be very innate parts of my being and things that really shaped who I am, and I'm going to be exposing them to the world and exposing them to criticism, as well as exposing my actions and my reactions to the world to criticism. But I feel like it's so important that people get this fundamental understanding of who I am before I start helping others. I want you guys to trust me, and I want you guys to trust me as a person. So I'm being completely bare with you guys because I want to help you. And ultimately, that's what this YouTube channel is about. I've always wanted to make a YouTube. I've always wanted to entertain, and I've always wanted to like help people in a way, but I've never been able to figure out what that way was for me. Because every time I got in the camera to do a Let's Play, or every time I got in the camera to do a makeup video, I was just overly awkward and inauthentic, and that bothered me. Well, I could have pushed through the awkwardness. It was just one of those things where I was like, maybe not. I wanted to do something that's going to feel authentic to every fiber of my being, and this is a project that I want to do with every fiber of my being, because I think that there's a place in this world that, like, we need this as a community. People need this form of therapy of sorts, where we've got so many things we need to talk about, and I don't want to just talk about myself and my issues, but I want to talk to you guys about yours. Eventually I want to live stream and do podcasts where I can go delve deeper into topics, or you guys can like write in and I can like listen to what you're saying and give you my honest, like, this is, give you this sort of like, not analyze it. Don't really want to give you advice, because I think that ultimately that comes up to you. But I do want to shift your perspective in those issues where maybe you yourself could come up with this other solution. As I said, I just want to give you the tools. I don't want to give you the answer, because ultimately you're the only one that can control your life, and you're not even really controlling it. It's just how you're reacting to the way the world sets itself upon you. That's the only thing you truly have control over. And once you realize that, and you really start to like put that control into how am I dealing with the world, and it's a very powerful thing, because it's the one thing you can most certainly control. It just takes a lot of practice, and I know that you guys can do it. And I'm sorry these videos were so long. Goodbye, and I hope you all subscribe to my channel, ring the little bell button, whatever. I want you guys to have a good life.